we're back with another edition of The Final Mile from Freight 360, where we are going to answer your questions that you guys have sent in. These all come from either our contact form on our website or from our Facebook group this week. So thanks for everyone's participation and involvement and asking questions. We love to do it. Please take a moment to check out our sponsors in the description box. That helps support the channel. And if you'd like to learn more about Freight 360 in our training, make sure to check out the Freight Broker Basics course. All right, our first question today comes from Jameson, who asks, I want to start a freight brokerage, but need to have an idea of how much money it will take to ensure I don't fail. I understand that there's a lot of expenses involved and appreciate the breakdown, but what I really need is a number. I love it. So we can't give anybody a solid number, because there are so many variables that go into this, right? One of the biggest variables is your bond, for example. One person's bond will cost different than someone else's bond, all based off of personal credit, business credit, things of that nature. So we can't give you an exact number, but what we can do, and I'm going to pull up one of our handy dandy blogs from our website here to help us out, is look at the kind of the range of expenses for some of the different things here. So let's take a look here. Well, first of all, we know that you have a $300 application fee.
Yep.
And you've got let me just pull it up here. We've got cost to start. So make sure you go to freight360.net and you can get all of our good stuff right on there. And here we go. How much does it cost to start a freight brokerage? Boom. So you've got your $300 application fee. That has not changed since I've been in the industry. Your bond or trust. So you can either put $75K in assets into a freight brokerage trust, or you can purchase a bond or pay for a bond on an annual basis. And I've seen range like $1,500 to $3K a year on the bond. Ben, have you seen anything outside of that?
No, I've heard of people say they came in a little higher, like in the mid 4s and low 5s, depending on their credit. But again, anecdotal, just what people have said to me.
Yep.
That they've got quoted a little bit higher. But again, that's going to be company to company. You can get quotes from other companies as well.
Exactly. Right. Other stuff, there is the UCR, the Unified Carrier Registration System, which almost every state requires, and it's under $50. I think it was like $40-something for 2023 for brokers. And then after that, I mean, those are like your basic requirements. But then you're going to look at, like, you're going to want a TMS. You're going to want load boards, right? So let's say if you went bare bone minimum, let's say you got a TMS, like, for example, Ascend TMS, right? And you can check out a link in our show notes to get a deal on that if you use the promo code, but it's under $100 a month and you get full access to everything that they have, right? Try out a free version too if you want to test it out first. Load boards. You can get 10% off your first year with DAT. Use the link in the show notes. But you can expect to probably spend conservatively, I would say, $300 a month on your software, TMS, and your load boards, right? And that's like on the cheap side. As you grow and expand, you'll have to have more licenses, more features, things of that nature. And then the big question mark is insurance, right? What are your customers going to require out of you? Well, I shouldn't say that's the only big one, because factoring / cash flow is another big one.
Yeah. Go through it, because I finish out those two. What can insurance run, give or take? Ballpark range on what you're seeing.
Depends on the size of your business. You could have no insurance outside of your bond, so you're going to pay zero. You might have $100,000 in premiums, though, with a big brokerage who has big general liability, umbrella policy, contingent cargo, contingent auto, right? All this stuff.
For a startup, say for a startup, and they're only going to get 100, and $1 million in general, and they're running 5 to 10 loads a week at most within their first.
You'd have months to get with an insurance broker. I'm gonna take a stab at it and say you're probably a few grand a year.
Yeah, probably.
It's my guess. Don't know. I don't sell insurance. I don't price it out. But that's my guess. And then there's a question of, do you use a factoring company and cut into your margin, or do you cash flow? right? And then you have to figure out how much money do I need to have in the bank if I'm going to do that. So those are my big ones. What did you have in mind?
Okay, so let's just break that down real quick, right? Like if you add your bond, which anyway, we'll call it 2 to 4 grand, you need to speak to somebody to get that, right? Just call it 3,500 for an average. And then you got your $300 fee, your UCR, and all of those costs to just get your license to be brokering, right? Little under 5 grand, depending on what your bond costs, right? Maybe it's 4, maybe it's 3,500, somewhere around there. Now, you got factoring and all that stuff and everything you're talking about. Your factoring is going to charge you usually on the business you've done. So you probably won't really incur a factoring charge until you're moving loads. So you're looking at about 5 grand, give or take, to get it off the ground. And then you got $300 to $400 a month in ongoing operational costs, right? It's kind of what we just outlined. And now once you got your first customer, say they ask for insurance, standard is 100,000 contingent, $1 million general. I have clients that are doing 10 million a year and they were paying under 10 grand. So, if you're just starting out, I'm guessing it's a little less than 5. To Nate's point, we're not insurance companies, can't quote this, but again, 5 grand, give or take, to get you off the ground, 300 a month ongoing. Once you got a customer, maybe you're at a couple thousand for insurance. Now, to me, those aren't the numbers you need to worry about. And here's why. Because the first question I always ask, if you are an entrepreneur and you're going to start your own business, how much money do you need to bring in to survive? What is your burn rate as a person, right? Because usually these businesses are started by people, right, that also either have another job. So the first question is, how much have you saved to give yourself runway to give this a true attempt? Meaning, if you're working part-time and your bills are whatever, 4 or 5 grand a month, and you're bringing in 5 grand a month, how much time do you have to allocate to this? If you're leaving your job to start a new venture, any company, right, you've got to figure out how much money do you have saved to pay your bills and all the numbers we just said for how long before you need money coming in the door. Because one of the biggest mistakes I think people make in starting any new company is when they leave a job to start the next company, they don't ask the question of, what is the time to money? So if you're going to start a freight brokerage from scratch, I wouldn't expect you're going to have any income for at least 3 months. Because even if you get a customer in your first 45 days and you get the insurance and you're running loads, they're typically going to pay those bills on 30 days. So now you're at 2 and change months. You're almost into the 3 months already. If you got a factoring company, you'll get your money quicker, but you're going to get less of it because part of that fee is going to come out of it. So the numbers I always talk through with any new business entrepreneur that wants to jump into it is, how much do you have saved and how long can you allocate a real amount of time to getting this business off the ground before you need more money coming in the door, right? In my opinion, if you're going to start a freight brokerage, you should have 4 to 6 months worth of runway, probably a little bit more. And that is if you have no income coming in from anywhere else.
That's probably a kind of a standard recommendation for any entrepreneur starting a company, right?
Yes, it has nothing to do with freight brokers. This is just what we used to do. Like I used to be a small business lender. And this is the first question you ask, because every person that wants to start their company, when they would go to a bank, their first words out of their mouth like, I want to start this business to quit my job. And as a bank, you're like, well, I need you to keep your job because that's how I qualify you as the loan. As soon as you quit your job, you don't qualify for the loan. So how are you going to have the time to build this? You either have to have money saved or you got to work 14 hours a day, one job at night and the other job during the day, which is what a lot of entrepreneurs do. And there are lots of ways around that, right? But I just use that as a drastic example.
Sure.
Because we've had clients that do both, right? They own businesses. They're able to allocate 4 or 5 hours a day at this until they get some customers, and then they'll allocate more time. But they still have money coming in, right? Same thing with truck drivers that we work with, that we have clients, right? Like they're driving on their resets, they're making phone calls until they can get one customer. They can start to get that off the ground. And as they get some more business in, they move towards a brokerage. Like we have a client today that I was working with, similar scenario, was a driver, got a great relationship with a place he delivered to often. That person he had a relationship with said, hey, I would love to give you a shot if you want to try your hand at brokerage. And they literally gave him his first loads. He was able to stop driving and transition into brokerage. So there are ways, but the numbers I always want people to think about is like, if you have no money coming in and you're expecting this new business to be able to support your lifestyle, whatever that number is, make sure you have reasonable expectations of when money will start coming back into your bank account, and then add an extra 20% in time or 50% in time.
Yep.
Like, everything takes longer than we expect and comes in over budget. That's just part of planning.
I've heard that in a variety of scenarios. All right, next question. A. Marie asks, I'm new to this brokering thing. What real advice do you have? Well, if someone truly is brand new and looking for advice, I'm going to say educate yourself as much as possible and shadow somebody some way. Like, somehow, even if it's virtual, you've got to understand the lingo and have some education, and you have to get exposed to it to know if you're going to like it. Are you going to be cut out for the amount of rejection and hustle and grind? And then you've got to have a game plan, right? Know how you're going to prospect and have a game plan for how much you're going to prospect. I think that's typically the biggest failure point is lack of education, or they're not prospecting the proper way. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, those are the two biggest reasons why I think people don't succeed, right? Are they making the calls, and are they doing the right things on those calls? We've got a lot of content out there through our library, at our website, freight360.net. Search through the videos. Be a sponge. Learn as much as you can at the beginning. The more you learn, the easier it will be. The less mistakes you're going to have to make in order to learn, right? And I always say, if people are thinking about it or they're jumping into it, pick a goal that is reasonable for call output and see if you can stick to that for 2 weeks. If you're not able to stick to whatever you set for yourself consistently for a few weeks, that should be a red flag, right? And again, If you're new, pick a low number to start with. If you've never made a cold call, you don't have to start out at 100 a day.
Make like 10.
15, whatever it is, a reasonable number, right? Get 10 numbers, 15 numbers, start doing that every day. You'll know real quick after the week or the second week whether or not you feel like you could keep doing this for the next year, 2 years, or 3 years.
Yep.
Because it is part of the gig. You do not get to build a business without that aspect of it.
For sure. Next up, Samir asks, is there a website where I can get some shippers? So I laughed when I first heard this one because people are like, oh, is there a load board you just go to find shippers? And the answer is no.
But there are
a ton of websites you can use to help you generate leads. So I want to hit, and by all means, check out the rest of our content on how to generate leads and how to find shippers. But I want to hit on a couple that are really cool that I've personally used and helped folks use to find leads. Data Axle used to be called Reference USA. Ben, I learned about it from you years ago. It is available for free if you have a library card through your local public library. It's on their typically the resources section. It's a great one, okay? And it's going to have you could search companies by their industry or is it their NMFC code or
NAICS code?
NAICS code. Other websites. So if you've heard of Zoom Info, that's one that you can get company and contact, name, email, and data on them. Apollo.io, I checked out recently. It's similar to Zoom Info. They get their data from a different blend of sources. It's much cheaper than Zoom Info. Chamber of Commerce websites are huge. If your county or if a county that you're prospecting in has one, you can, similar to that Reference USA Data Axle style thing, you can search and segment leads using the type of commodity that they're hauling. Blue Book services, right? Lumberbluebook.com and producebluebook.com, both membership-based organizations where they've got tens of thousands of very specific niche leads and companies with their contact information inside of their website for those two industries. Google, dude, I've even checked. Remember, we've played around with like AI and so go to Bard, right? From Google, give me the top 50 steel manufacturers in the country, right? And it'll spit out with somewhat good accuracy, just a bunch of names of companies. Yep. What do you think? What else?
LinkedIn is another one. Seamless, I think it's seamless.ai is another one that's similar to Apollo. It's like Zoom Info, but it's cheaper. Rocket Reach is another one that functions like Zoom Info, that our clients have used. I've not used any of the three of those, but I did recommend all three of them to somebody earlier because enough of our clients do use all three of those: Apollo, Rocket Reach, and Seamless.ai. The other place, you said Chamber of Commerce. I mean, associations are
I was going
great
to say
places.
associations for sure. If they have a membership list.
Yep. Blue Book Services is another one. Blue Book Lumber, Blue Book Produce, right, are two other great places to find leads. The other thing for me too is I think you should think about where your interest is. And again, see our video on prospecting with a purpose for more on this topic, but think about your history, what you've done and what you have experience in. And I would look for areas where there are products that ship in your interest. Maybe you play, roller hockey. There's lots of products that get shipped that support that industry. Maybe you're into basket weaving. There are huge industries that support quilting and things like that, needlepoint. You would be amazed at how many products are manufactured to things that seem like small niches that are really good opportunities for shippers. And you're going to be able to have much more effective conversations with a representative at a company if you have a passion for what it is they manufacture or distribute. You just have better conversations. So whether you are a bartender and you have an interest in different types of liqueurs, there you go, liquor manufacturers. You talked about bottling companies, right? Think about where your interest lies. And I think that's always a good cue to start with. What I use is I look for things that are happening in the news related to the economics of an industry. And those are what give me the start. And I just pull on that thread until I find more information. Like
absolutely.
The auto workers union strike, right? Like, okay, there are issues with auto parts being shipped. Maybe there's less, maybe there's more, but there's disruption in that industry. To me, I'm going to go start to look for companies that manufacture auto parts, right? Look for the NAICS code and data axle, throw that in, find another list of companies, throw those into LinkedIn, and then throw whatever I get out of LinkedIn for their titles into Apollo. And now I've got a real lead to dump into my CRM.
So the takeaway here is that there's no easy website that just gives you shippers that want to give you business, but you can, I would say the majority of your prospecting will probably be done using websites on the internet. So, but you still have to put the hard work in and do it. All right, next up is Haiti, who asks, I have a question. As a new small broker, how do you get a credit rating with factoring companies? I've been declined by a few carriers because their factoring won't work with me. We've gotten this question a lot, and we've definitely checked out the episodes we did with Des Clark and Pardeep Singh about their success getting started as a new broker. There's a couple ways. There's no right way to do it. It takes time and it is difficult. The easiest way is just you have to have money and you have to quick pay carriers at no expense and ask them to report your payments to crediting or credit companies. So that way your days to pay will then be populated.
And
you
to that
also
point,
go ahead.
To that one before you go to the next one, right? One of the things that you can do easily, like HallPay does this, is you set your pay terms to every carrier to 14 days for 6 months. So to your point, it just automatically pays at 14 days. That's going to help your credit. But what you want them to do is you want them to pay your carrier's factoring company. Because if you pay a carrier direct, the carrier is not likely to report that even when you do it to the agency to get you the benefit. So when you can, you want to be having your factoring company basically pay their factoring company because they will report it more often and more likely than paying directly to a carrier too.
Yeah, I mean, that's a way to guarantee that the payment gets reported. Yep, for sure. The other thing too is call up these factoring companies and ask them, what is it that you need to see from me that would make you feel more comfortable working, right? Because we gave you our advice, but that doesn't mean that a factoring company thinks the same way that we do. So just ask them person to person.
Yeah, and a few of the other things that I think Desmond pointed out, or we've talked about on the show, right, are literally put money on deposit with the factoring companies. I think maybe Pardeep mentioned that, where he literally went to the factoring company and put 15 grand on deposit. And as it drew down, made sure there was some in there for a short amount of time that made the factoring company, a little more comfortable with it. At the end of the day, a factoring company is a lender. They will operate like a bank, right? So again, if you get the automated response of no, pick up the phone and call it. It's a human being. There are people over there that you can talk to. You can make your case to. They can make exclusions. They can make,
Exceptions to policy.
exceptions to policy is where I was going with it. Absolutely.
Yep. All right, last question from Madam18. I love the username. Brokers are considered the middleman, but who do you fight for? The customer, the carrier, or do you try to appease both? And who is responsible for educating either side, if not you? This is a great question. And
very good question.
A lot of people will think that you've got to focus on your customer, and that is not the right answer. I will tell you, I think that if you are equally supportive of both parties, the shipper and the carrier, you will likely have the most success as a freight broker, because you are not in it for yourself. You are literally you're going to profit from it and prosper because of it, but you're becoming an extension of your shipper's supply chain and logistics department. So you're helping them solve their problems and handle their needs. And the same thing for the carrier. Their problems and needs are being met and solved as well, right? Which is find me freight that pays me what I want it to pay and puts me in a location that I want to go to. That is our job. So we should be advocates of both sides. If you start to let one slide and favor the other, you'll likely lose the other side, right? If I favor my shippers and my customers, and I basically say, screw you to carriers, I'm going to get a bad reputation and have carriers that don't want to work with me and are not reliable. If I'm so focused on my carriers and not my customers, I'm going to lose my shippers. I'm going to have no freight to give to my carriers. So it's a balancing act. It's a juggling act. You've really got to fight for both. Now, the education side, you should be educating both, right? Let your carriers know what's going on with demand for trucking right now, for capacity. And that comes from your shippers, right?
Yep.
Let your customers, your shippers know what the available capacity in certain markets look like for trucks. And that's on you as a broker to add value. What's your take?
100%. I mean, not only does it make good business sense and is it ethical to treat them both well, right? But furthermore, it makes good business sense, right? And I'll give you an example, right? And you pointed it out, but I'll just go a little bit further in it, right? So let's say I favor my shipper and I am pushing my carriers below what is feasible, meaning I leverage everyone into taking a load for a little less money than they want to because they really needed it, right? Well, I win temporarily because I get a little bit more margin, right? But guess where I lose? I lose in multiple ways. One way I lose is next week, if I have that same load, I have to put the same amount of work in that I spent in today. So I literally have to go do the same thing to get the same benefit.
Yep.
The second way, to your point, is not only do I have more work finding that carrier, but I'm less likely to be able to get the same load from that shipper too, and the carrier. And here's an example of how you can execute this in a way that it works for both. If my shipper wants to pay $1,000 and my carrier 15% margins try to pay him $850, right? And he's like, look, I would really like this lane. $850 won't work with where I'm at right now. I got a little deadhead. Can you get me $875? Now, in that instance, I can either shrink my margin or I go back to my customer. And I go back to my customer and I educate them and I go, hey, look, I've got a reliable driver that I've worked with in the past that he's delivering close to where your load picks up every week. I think this would be a great fit for him every week. Can we get an extra $25 to help him out? Because if this load goes well, I think he could be a fit to run this load for you every week at a pretty reasonable, fair rate. And if I've educated my customer well and listened to my carrier and their concerns, there's a very good likelihood that now every single week that driver, when he gets there, sends me an email and says, hey, do you got that load? And every week I email that customer at first and go, hey, do you got that load? If they can give it to me, I spend no effort in finding the truck. And yeah, I made maybe a few percentages less if I even didn't get the extra 25 from my customer, but I got the same carrier running it every week. Now it's like plug and play, right? Like I've got that revenue on my book of business every single week until that lane doesn't do what it's supposed to do what it's doing anymore. And I don't have to spend any more time. The carrier wins, the shipper wins, the broker wins, everybody wins because you found a way to make it work for everybody. And economically, it makes better sense for everyone too. Like you don't got to beat one side or the other. It's like that old saying I always think, like, cutting off your nose to spite your face, right? You do something that seems like it's going to help you, but you really just created more work for yourself in the future and you never get out of that hamster wheel. So to me, exactly right. You should be constantly educating both sides And often, right, because they're going about what they're doing, it is our job to bring market insight from not just the truck, but what is happening in the market to the shippers. They don't see the market the way you do. Just because they pay money to access the market doesn't mean they're in the market, right? In the same way, lots of people buy stocks. None of them really have the same insight as the person on the trading floor that is trading those stocks, right? Same thing with brokers. We live in that market. We've got to educate both sides as to what's happening, when, and why, right? And if you communicate effectively, now you're doing the job at a higher level than the people just trying to perform tasks.
Love it. Good. It's good insight, man. Appreciate that. Well, great questions. Continue to send them our way, people. We will get them on the show as time permits. We tend to get to about 5 each week, but we appreciate you joining us on the Final Mile. Ben, final thoughts?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills.